Well, as this Gonzaga team gets off to one of the best starts in Gonzaga history, and a lot of people are having the conversation around where does this team fall in terms of all-time Zags teams, we had a conversation over the weekend that we thought might be fun to bring to air, and what it is an all-time Zags starting five. And
of the modern era.
Of the modern era,
Mark
of
Few era.
the Mark Few era. You look at a guy like John Stockton, and we're not going to try and play the game of where would his game be today.
Sure.
First off,
Sure.
complete baller in college, 20.9 points per game, 7 assists. He averaged 4 steals a game his senior season.
That's insane.
One thing that's very interesting that a lot of viewers may not know is he never played in college with a three-point line. The three-point line wasn't added to the NCAA till 2 years after he was gone. And we're also not talking about like the greatest players of all time and what they did in their career. Stockton was a Hall of Famer. Of course he would be in there. If you look at, what Sabonis is doing in the NBA today, he's arguably doing the second most of any player in Gonzaga history right now.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is what five could you put on a floor against any other Gonzaga five and play 100 games, and you're probably going to win the most games, and that's what we came up with, okay?
Yep.
So we were a little flexible on positions, and we're not going based off of, if you gave me Killian Tilly in the WCC tournament from a few years ago,
Sure.
I'm beating you every single time.
Yep.
You give me Perk in the Final Four when he could not miss from three. We're taking essentially their best year.
Yep.
Okay. And let's go line by line here. We had a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah.
At the point guard position, the first guy we had was Nigel Williams-Goss. This is a 6'3", 185-pound point guard running your offense. He averaged 16.8 points per game. His only season at Gonzaga.
Yep.
4.5 assists, 1.7 steals, 6 rebounds. He shot 48% from the field, 36% from three. And on this show, we've recently started to talk a lot about the Evan Maya stats, that efficiency ratings, offensive, defensive, total. And that's only been tracked actually since that season.
Yeah.
And in the 2016-2017 season, he actually finished number 1 with 116.5 BPR.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely insane. His defensive BPR in there is, like a 57.1? I mean, for reference, you have Mitchell from Baylor.
Yeah.
Blanking on a first name here. I'm terrible. But I believe he's a 43.1, one of the best defenders in the country. So for Nigel Williams-Goss to put that up, I mean, a lot of people just didn't realize how good he was defensively, how important his defense was in that tournament run. Great player, man. And it's hard not to go with him in that line. But, of course, there were a lot of other players we considered in this spot as well.
Yeah, I mean, you go way back. You got guys like Dan Dickow, Blake Stepp. As we were looking through, I really considered a guy like Kevin Pangos.
Yep.
We did quite a bit of deep digging into numbers, efficiency, stats, all of that. But Pangos would definitely be up there as well. Of course, you got Perkins.
Yeah.
But our starting point guard on this, our 5 versus your 5 is Nigel Williams-Goss. Going to the 2 spot playing shooting guard, we got Jalen Suggs.
Yeah.
This is a guy who obviously only has half of a season under his belt to this point, but we're going based off of pure athletic, his upside.
100%.
If you take him against any of, really those ones that we just talked about, no one's really going to be able to match up with him and his ability to get his hands in the passing lane, him as a facilitator. But in our 5, we actually played him at the 2, which I thought was a very interesting decision.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Obviously, we debated back and forth on this a little bit. You think of players, again, that you might sub in that spot. Jordan Matthews has to be a mention. I mean, this guy who has possibly the biggest shot in Gonzaga history. Another guy who analytically was very underrated as well. I know there's probably people out there that, love Zach Norvell, maybe want him in there for his instant offense. But for me, I love a couple things about this decision here. I love having 2 ball handlers on the floor.
Yep.
We've seen Gonzaga want to do that. Obviously, in the tournament run, you had Perkins and Nigel Williams-Goss essentially running a dual point guard system.
Very similar to this.
Exactly. So we know it's something that Mark Few likes, and it works within this offense. But on top of that, you said it, his athleticism is just so unreal. And to add in that defense as well, I mean, you're getting 2.5 steals a game, as well as just his on-ball defense. We've seen it game in and game out this year. He is a tenacious defender out there, and he really helps his team get out in transition. And I tell you what, man, it's hard not to put him there. I'm happy with the decision. I mean, he brings everything to the table. He's your defense. He's your transition player. He's a good ball handler. And on top of that, it's just Jalen Suggs, man. How do you not put him in there with what we've seen? We haven't seen him in the NBA yet. We know he's going to be a high pick. He's just a player you have to have in this lineup.
Yeah, if you go with this lineup, you're going to have two great defenders. You're going to have two ball handlers, like you said. You're not getting maybe the 3-point production you'd want to get out of your 1 and 2.
Both guys mean 36%, though, so you're not losing a ton.
Which means with your 3 spot, you really need someone who can shoot the rock. And I'll tell you what, who we came up with playing that spot is someone who a year ago I would have never imagined having in this conversation. It just shows you how far his game's come along. And that's Corey Kispert. Corey Kispert, I believe, is on his way to winning National Player of the Year.
Yep.
To do what he's doing on this team with the talent around him is extremely impressive. So you've got a 6'7", 220-pound small forward in this role. He scored 20 points per game, 5 rebounds. He's shooting 57% from the field, almost 49% from 3. Going back to the Evan Maya is 106.6 BPR. And I'll tell you that I think that this pick, could we have played Corey Kispert at the 2? Absolutely.
It was a discussion.
We'll get into later on here some of the other lineups and different discussions we had. So if you're playing Kispert at the 2, it allows you to do some different things. We've got him playing the 3 in this spot. But I think the big discussion we came down to is having a guy like Corey Kispert play the 3 versus an all-time Gonzaga great in Adam Morrison.
Yeah, that was a big discussion we had. I mean, it was a long one. You and I went back and forth on it a little bit. Obviously, Adam Morrison averaged 28 points a game, 6'8". He brings size to the position. I believe he shot 42% from 3 his last year at Gonzaga.
Yeah, 49
as well.
from the field.
Yeah, so we know what he brings offensively. For us, the discussion here is, what do you lose defensively?
A lot.
And, we love ammo. I think he'll be the first to say it too, is you do lose some defensively with him in a lineup. And that's where, we're picking the best all-time starting 5. You got to take that into consideration. And this is, back to Corey Kispert. Corey Kispert this year is averaging 20 points a game on 55, 45, 90. It's 55% from the field, 45 from 3, 90% from the free throw line. No D1 player, and this is according to Jared Burson on Twitter. He's a researcher for ESPN Stats and Info. No D1 player in the last 30 years, or likely ever in his words, has averaged 20 points a game on 55, 45, 90. It is just unreal what Kispert's doing. His 3-point in particular, 48.6% on his volume, over 6 attempts a game to shoot that. It's unreal. It's unreal. And again, we're going to reference a lot of Evan Maya stats here, but Corey Kispert's defensive ratings are better than a lot of people think. I believe he's about a 37 DPR. And that right there, it's underrated, and he fits so well with this backcourt. And I think it's just props to Corey Kispert for what he's done this year, because it was a discussion, but both of us settled on that pretty quickly. The Corey Kispert has earned a spot in this lineup.
I think the big stride that a lot of people see in Corey Kispert's game this year is his ability to get to the rim,
Absolutely.
Which is huge. That is why his field goal percentage is up so much. I think the improvement he made defensively is really being overlooked.
100%.
Adam Morrison, you could put Adam Morrison in any era on any team, and he's going to get buckets. We know that.
Absolutely.
But you look at who Adam Morrison had playing around him. I think what's interesting is if you put Corey Kispert on that team instead of Adam Morrison, I know that Corey Kispert's averaging 28 points per game as well. What's interesting is Kispert is more of a 3-point shooter versus Morrison. Morrison definitely shot the 3.
Just a bucket getter, though.
But Morrison really had that 15, 17-foot pull-up.
Oh, all around.
He was doing all the time. And here's the thing. Corey Kispert shooting 57% from the field, where Morrison shot 49%, and he's a guy who's shooting a deeper shot. And so I do think it all boiled down to us defensively, where Corey Kispert took the advantage over Ammo, but that was quite the discussion to have. Going to the 4, and this is a guy, too, that we could have very easily slid into the 3, and that's Rui Hachimura. He's a 6'8", 230 pounds at the 4, averaged 19.7 points per game his last season at Gonzaga, 6.5 rebounds, shot 59% from the field, and Evan Maya had him at a 99 BPR. And so I think as you're starting to see our lineup play out here, one thing is evident. It's a very athletic team.
Absolutely.
It's a team that may not be the biggest team, and we'll get to our 5 here in just a second, but it's a team that's very athletic, is going to be able to play the style of basketball Mark Few likes to play, which is to get out, run in transition, and create turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that shift for Gonzaga the last few years. I think Mark Few's been preaching for it for a long time, for his teams to play faster and faster and faster. And I mean, I remember earlier this year, he said this was finally a team that he didn't have to tell to play faster. This is a team that knew what they had. They look out, and that's the style he wants to play.
We've been seeing him do this for years.
Right?
We don't see that a whole lot this year.
No, you don't. And I mean, it just shows you this is finally to what he wants to get to. And obviously, in the college game, we talked about it in our Gonzaga season preview, but Mark Few had realized the importance of the number of possessions in a game. It sounds silly to say that, right? You think it would be important, but actually placing a focus on playing faster and having more possessions does a ton, and especially when you are when you're an efficient offensive team. And I mean, every player we're listing here has had just unreal seasons for Gonzaga, their ability to score the ball, and that's exactly why this fits so well. Rui brings so much to that 4 spot. He is a mismatched nightmare at the 4. For a lot of teams, they're going to play bigger, and they're not going to keep up with Rui. He's going to be able to attack him to the rim. And Rui's also a guy that, albeit was a very low sample size, he only took 1 a game, but he shot 41.7% from 3 his last season at Gonzaga. So it was somebody you have to respect. He keeps that defense stretched out. And, for me, I love what he brings to this team, and it really allows them to get out in transition. And I think that's the focus on this lineup. And I absolutely love the fit.
My favorite part of Rui's game, I grew up playing in a flex-style offense where you took a lot of elbow shots, and I think Rui Hachimura was the best elbow shooter in Gonzaga history. It was automatic. I mean, he had to have shot plus 85% from that shot that last year at Gonzaga.
The Washington Huskies don't want to admit that, but they know that's true.
But you look at how he fits in this system and what a guy like that can do playing the high post.
Sure.
It's a huge deal to have a guy that can bring at the 4 to bring guys out a little bit. It's going to open up the next guy we'll mention here in just a minute. But I do want to mention someone who was very, very close to making our list that I don't think many people would even have in the conversation, and that's Kyle Wiltjer. Kyle Wiltjer, that's a 6'10", 240-pound 4 or 5, but he's a stretch 4, and he averaged 20 points per game, 6 rebounds, shot 49% from the field, 43% from 3. And you got to be careful with the 3-point stats because you do have to take sample size.
And volume,
And this is what stood out with me about Kyle Wiltjer is Corey Kispert is averaging 3 made threes per game right now. And we think of Corey Kispert, I think a lot of people would say, well, Corey Kispert's probably the best 3-point shooter in Gonzaga history. Well, what did Kyle Wiltjer average per game? 2.5 made threes per game. And so the reason we didn't have Wiltjer in there was maybe a little bit of lack of defense and athleticism that you would get from a guy like Rui.
Sure.
But the ability to play that stretch 4, we saw it a lot from a guy like Killian Tilly. Obviously, Tilly just was never able to stay on the floor, but another stretch 4, athletic, can shoot the 3. But Kyle Wiltjer was a guy we were very close to putting in there.
Yeah, it was conversation.
Let's get to our 5, and we were both from the very beginning.
This might have been the worst. This was the hardest.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, though, when we started this was the one guy that we knew was going to be on the floor. I don't think we ever had a discussion that he wouldn't be part of this 5.
Sure.
But that being said, the talent that you've actually seen, Gonzaga early in Mark Few's era, Gonzaga was definitely known for its guards. Yeah. But over the last 5 to 10 years, it's been the bigs at Gonzaga that have really come in and flourished. And we had a really hard time with this one.
Yeah.
Our starting five for this team is Brandon Clark, a 6'8", 215-pound center. You might be a little undersized. I think he's got the bunnies to make up for a lot of that. He averaged 16.9 points per game, 8 rebounds, 3 blocks, which is a big reason that him as a rim protector, we have him in here. He shot 68% from the field, and he is the highest rated player in the Evan Maya era at 121.7 BPR for Gonzaga players. He finished just behind Zion that year.
And one of the most efficient seasons in college basketball history.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit first about how Brandon Clark fits into this team.
I mean, right away, we've talked about it a lot, but this team's ability to get out in transition.
Yeah.
Brandon Clark in transition was obviously just borderline unfair. I mean, his ability to jump right over the top of you and finish also has one of the best floaters we've seen in recent college seasons, and especially from a big man, that's so rare. But for me, it's the defense and transition and just efficiency. Those 3 things right there. I mean, it's so hard to beat that. And I tell you what, man, he keeps up with this team. Let's look at this 5 as a whole. Nigel Williams-Goss, Jalen Suggs, Corey Kispert, Hachimura, and Brandon Clark. How do you guard that team in transition? You've got Nigel Williams-Goss running that show, coming up the floor. You've got to account for Suggs, Hachimura, and Clark attacking the rim. Oh, and then you've got a guy named Corey Kispert that's trailing, looking for the threes as well. And we've seen his transition threes from the wings are pretty much automatic at this point. Brandon Clark fits so well with this, and I think that is just such a problem for defenses to have to stop that team in transition.
I think it's easy. I mean, if that team's coming at you in transition, it's actually very easy what you do. It's you get ready to inbound the ball after the shot's made.
Yeah, you just get out of the way.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all you got.
Guys that we also obviously consider. Let's just go straight into the main omission here. And the guy that we had a really hard time leaving off this list was Domantas Sabonis, a guy we just talked about on this show. He averaged 17 points per game, 11 rebounds. You're getting a little bit more rebounding out of Domas. Little bit more, a little bit better of a passer even.
Yep.
But, Brandon Clark averaged 3 blocks per game. Domas averaged 0.9 blocks per game.
That's big.
And it's a guy that we been talked into putting in here? Absolutely. We were obviously, I think now that you see this lineup, going for athleticism, going for a team who could run the type of play that Mark Few wants to run. Sabonis was an amazing college player. He's really blossomed in the NBA to being his full potential, so you have to be able to look at that college sample size. Other guys that we left off of here, Kelly Olynyk,
that was a big discussion.
7-footer, 17.8 points per game, 7 rebounds, shot 62% from the field. More of a stretch 5. He didn't quite shoot the ball from deep as well at Gonzaga as he has in the NBA. He's turned into a great shooter from deep in the NBA.
Made himself his money.
Yeah, for a 7-footer.
Yeah.
And another guy that we have to mention is Shemek Karnowski. I mean, Shemek Karnowski probably is the best passing big in the history of Gonzaga. As you mentioned, a mountain of a man.
Absolute mountain.
But doesn't play the style of basketball that we're looking at in this. Isn't going to move.
Slows you down a lot.
Isn't going to move very well. But that is our starting 5.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I love that starting 5, but I just want to go back to the Clark-Sabonis for a second because I know that's going to be a hot spot, right? That is a tough conversation, a tough decision to make. And for us, what it came down to is the fact that you got to look at how they play together.
Yeah.
And if we're going pure talent on the floor, we both want Clark and Sabonis on the floor.
100%.
However, it becomes where's the spacing come from? Because, again, you look at college samples, not counting NBA. Neither of these guys were stretching the floor during their last year at Gonzaga. Could they hit a 3? Yes. Was it something that they were going to do, or was it something that was going to be respected by defenses on a play-by-play basis? And the answer on that was no, it wasn't. So you end up with a crowded front court in our minds if you have Clark and Sabonis out there at the same time. And that's where that discussion got tough. And that's where we had to pick between the two. And for us, it was just really adding in that rim protection. You got to have it because while you have good plus defenders out there, I mean, your backcourt defense in this lineup is great. You have plus defenders. You got to have some rim protection when you're undersized, and that comes from Brandon Clarke. That was the deciding factor there. But this lineup, man, I tell you what, you roll this out against any Gonzaga, other 5. I think you roll it out against any team in the nation, and that team is running, man. That's going to be a great team to watch. I mean, especially once you start adding some bench players in there. We've obviously talked about a lot of honorable mentions. You can build out a fantastic bench behind that starting 5. But for us, man, tell you what, that's a pretty hard starting 5 to beat.
Yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to imagine Clarke and Sabonis on the floor at the same time. I think either of those guys are going to be able to get to the rim, dominate the low block, but the other one's just standing around at that point. So in our offense here, you've got Clarke down there at the block, Rui at the high post ready to hit his shot, Kispert at the wing ready to snipe, and 2 other ball handlers who can get to the rim, can facilitate, do the whole thing. We want to hear from you, though. What's your starting 5? Do you have a starting 5 that you could put against our starting 5 and you think could beat these guys? We want to hear it. I think
Absolutely.
It's an awesome discussion to have. So make sure, go in the comments, put that. I think it'll be a lot of fun to see what you come up with. And
a lot of good options out there, man. Tell you what, we're happy with ours, but I think we're going to see some starting 5s people mention that are going to be fun to think about, man.
Yeah, and it'll be a fun conversation to keep going as the talent continues to come into this Gonzaga program.
Yeah.
This is probably a video we're going to do once or twice a year, I think. Imagine a guy like, I don't know, Chet Holmgren in the mix after maybe a season.
He might fit in there somewhere.
Of Gonzaga basketball, a potential number 1 overall pick. But that's our starting 5. Let us know what yours is down in the comments.